Alright, yeah, so here we are with this new game that's been sitting in my library for a while now, called Werewolf the Apocalypse Heart of the Forest. I thought I'd be playing We Happy Few again, but I thought I'd just check this out first, since I have such a backlog of games right now. I don't know much about it, I haven't watched any videos on it or anything. It's just an interactive visual novel as far as I know, so it's might not be as action oriented as some of my other games, but let's just see what it's like anyway. Let me know what you think. A new game. Doesn't look like OBS wants to bring up my chat overlay here, but this is a game about rage and how it helps us to do things that need to be done as well as things that we later regret, sometimes both. How do you feel about that? I'm always angry. I'm okay with anger when it's useful. Well, I prefer to think before I act. Well, I am angry all the time, but I do think before I act. So, you're observant and cunning type. That's okay. There's no right path here. Just your decisions and their consequences. Let's just follow the path and see where it takes us. Alright. The forest. The woods are full of stars. They flicker, come closer, run away. They want me to chase them. I play hide and seek. Well, if they want me to chase them, then I would observe. I watch as they dance around the tree trunks, float up on the gusts of wind that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves. There are no words in their dance, but I don't understand them, not yet. When they bunch up and fly towards me like an arrow rushing down, they're soon upon me, but just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear, and the dark of the night returns. In the darkness, the spirits keep the forest alive, whisper about the enemy. I begin to move unnoticed, one with the night, and then I wake up. Cold and alone. Confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay to such an extent that it's hard to breathe. Recognize this forest? Why am I here? That's a good question. Why am I here? My head is spinning. Why am I here? There must be a reason. The tree trunks wrapped tightly in the dark leaved ivy are covered in ripples of lichen where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate with a ghoulish, sickly green light. The dark, sponge-like mushrooms cling to fallen trees. I try to breathe, I'm cold, or something is rotten. I think breathing is important, isn't it? I take a deep breath and suddenly realize that it's not the forest that smells foul. It's me! I look down to see my hands covered in dark substance. I'm naked, sticky, glistening film of liquid clinging to my skin. I can feel it on my face, hair, blood. I'm alert. Nature is never quiet. The leaves rustle in the wind. Small creatures scuttle in the undergrowth. There is a whisper. I don't understand what it means, but the word resonates in my head. Garou. Who said that? There is a severed head right in front of me. Some choices are hard to make, and they strain your willpower. I went and touched it. I'm gonna be sick. I have more willpower than rage right now, so I guess that's the way to go. Overcoming my disgust, I gently touch its wet hair and watch as the head topples over. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open, as though the head were struggling for air. I look at it and start to laugh, and then the eyes open in the darkness. Who is it? You can see their silhouettes, shades of jet black against the darkness. They smell of fur and moss and bloodied earth, massive creatures, some with horns, some with antlers. Their eyes burn like small, fiery windows into hell. I look at them, something wakes inside of me. I think I'll save my rage. I get up and start to run. I catch my foot on a gnarled root and fall over. The brambles reach out for me, wrapping their thorny limbs around my legs. I struggle and fall face first into the ground. The moss covers my face and pushes itself into my open mouth, choking me. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants from me, and then I wake up. Again? Chapter 1: The Arrival. Dreams. Maya, Maya, wake up. I opened my eyes. My neck is stiff. I stretched lazily as I assessed where I was out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun, streaming through the windows, was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder, disturbed. I comforted her. It's all right. I squeezed her hand to comfort her. She looked at me concerned. You had a bad dream. The memory of wet earth clogging my mouth was still there. I felt the urge to retch. I looked outside. Trees were pushing up against the narrow roads, their boughs tangled, their trunks carpeted with moss. It was the forest from my dreams. We're almost there, said the girl next to me. Her name was Anya. We'd met a couple of weeks earlier on the orientation day. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow I'd managed to talk her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. She seemed excited. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my kabanasi, dried, meaty sausages that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the US. I was glad Anya had decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around and really needed one. I did some searching, she said, from over her phone, and this place is amazing, the last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I'd managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches and visiting Białowieża National Park with me instead. So far, it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling. But why are we here again? Good question. Why were we there? There being Białowieża is a province, being Białowieża, a small village in northeast Poland near the border with Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. The most honest answer would have been, because I've been dreaming about the forest in Białowieża since I can remember, but people don't understand when I said things like that. I looked her in the eyes. Keep it simple so I wouldn't freak her out. I'm looking for my roots. I kept it simple so I wouldn't freak her out. What I didn't tell her was even more important. I knew my family was from there. None of my relatives spoke about it though. There were a lot of things that weren't spoken about in my life. Strange dreams that plagued me, half forgotten tales about forests and wolves that I'd heard before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad and his family. I waited for her to respond. Anya fell silent for a moment. I think it's great that you've come from such a magical place, she smiled. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything, about my future. That damn forest and my weird-ass family. I had a clear goal in mind. I wasn't there by mistake. I'd planned this trip for months, with a clear goal in mind. I had to face the forest, I had to learn the truth about my roots, I had to figure out my destiny. Well, that's what we told her. My grandfather's stories and secrets, my mother's running away, there was a mystery in my past. It was time I uncovered the truth about who I was. There was a mystery to uncover, an adventure to be had. I couldn't wait. Welcome home, Białowieża. It looked like an overexposed photo of a village with contrast turned all the way up. It was hot, sleepy day on a hot, sleepy street, and everything, the old trees, the yellow grass, the weathered wooden houses, the fences, seemed almost normal. Everything except the shadows, they were sharp as though they had freshly printed with the darkest of inks, and they moved. For a second I could have sworn they'd moved, but then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I watched it with suspicion. I don't trust cats. Hey, do you think those are rabid cats? 'Cause this one's acting weird. I mean, there are rabid squirrels. Why not cats? She shrugged, looking around. Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go. Anya put on her backpack. I'm tired, and I really need to find a toilet. For a moment, I was tempted to just get out of the sun and worry about my missing friend later. The meeting was just too important. Let's just wait a little longer, I said. I don't have his number, and we really need to meet up with him. His name was Bartek. I had met him online while researching Białowieża. The man knew everything there was to know about local history. I asked him to check if anyone in town remembers my grandparents. I hope he's found something. I really need to pee, Anya said like I was 5-year-old, and not a very bright one. I get rage from doing this one. Okay, let's go. I grabbed my backpack and stormed off, angry at Bartek, Anya's tiny bladder, and the creepy cat. What is this? Okay. Just her character sheet here. Healthy. I should pursue to regain willpower. Białowieża had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodation was bed and breakfasts. That's where we stayed. I don't think I'll ever stay at a hostel after watching an Eli Roth movie. I found that was a nice clean and that had good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. We dropped off our stuff and freshened up a bit. Maybe we should have waited for your friend, Anya asked, concerned. I shrugged. I'll find him sooner or later. Before you go, check out your character sheet. Look for the upper right corner of the screen. Find a load of useful info about Maya, your background, personality, goals, and so on there. And check out your friends or who your enemies are. Valveza was a quaint tourist town, but I had other things in mind. Lay of the land. I had a clear goal in mind. My family was entangled with this town and forest. I had to uncover my roots. Anya went with you. Serendipity. As we walked through town, Anya nudged me and pointed at a tall, broad-shouldered, freckled guy standing at the bus stop with a lost expression on his face. I remembered his face from pictures on social media. It was a friend who had stood me up earlier. I greeted him. Bartek, I asked, getting his attention. Maya, what are you doing here? He blurted with surprise when he saw me. I was sure you were coming on the later bus. We started walking and talking. His accent was broad and East European. Flooded with questions. Anya liked him. I caught him looking at me. Anya took an immediate liking to him. I could tell. I always could smell romance in the air. We walked along the only street in the village nearing the center, if you could call it that. Avios had a garden and the air was dense with the fragrance of flowers. I took a deep breath. So, did you manage to trace the name I gave you? I asked. Bartek shook his head. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sorry. He was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. He was clearly lying to me, but why? Come on, man. I said you wrote to me that you'd found something. But he just clammed up. You know what? I think you should drop it. I stopped. He was scared of something. I turned to Bartek and touched his arm. What's eating at you, man? He shrugged and shook his head. You can tell us, Anya added gently. I taunted him a bit. What are you afraid of? I spread my arms. Little me? The game tracks your decisions and how Maya approaches problems, and they will accumulate and gradually reveal what kind of person she is, deep in her heart. Story changes reflect Maya's personality. Well, he brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told them that my friend from the States was looking for her roots and wanted to know about her place and family from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And then I mentioned your name. He shook his head. I'll just stay calm down. I walked in silence for a long time. Finally, I nodded and he continued his story. One of the old men here told me to go to hell. The other spat on the ground and his wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller, and then my own grandmother told me to stop asking. She said something else as well. What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. Suddenly, the sweet golden afternoon wasn't so sweet and golden anymore. Who was I? I looked at Bartek and saw the stories he'd heard had clearly strained something between us. He was afraid of me. Who was I? We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk, and that could only mean one thing. I was on the right track. Oh, progressed. My pulse quickened and tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was on the right track. From you learn something significant, brings you closer to your goal, you regain willpower. Ready to see some sights. Time to see the sights, I nodded at Bartek. Show me everything this place has to offer. We walked through the village. I bathed in the sharp rays of the summer sun. It was a lazy afternoon, disturbed only by the occasional passing car, throwing up clouds of dust that hung in the air long after the vehicle was gone. Anya was close to Bartek, asking him about every detail of the village. People were relaxing or working in their yards, dogs were barking, and every cat we froze to look at us. People seemed quite friendly, though. Some of them smiled at us as we passed by, and every once in a while we stopped for some small talk with people who knew Bartek. I expected fewer stares. The cats behaved strangely. Just a tourist village. What's up with cats? What's with the cats? I asked as we passed a tabby who stopped in the middle of the sidewalk to meow at us. I don't know, they're cats. Maybe they want to make up the villagers' manners, Bartek shrugged. You know, some people are wary of newcomers. I was curious why. Why? Asked Candley. It's complicated. Bartek scratched his neck, embarrassed by the topic. There's a small conflict around the forest, you know. It's attracting some weird people. Activists, reporters, bored rich kids. As though his dad didn't own multiple businesses. People like that, and they're getting on locals' nerves. I was standing frowning. I looked skeptical. I looked at the conflict online, she said, and it didn't look so small. It looked pretty important, actually. For a moment, Bartek looked like he was lost for words. Well, you're not one of the crazies, and you're like almost local, he smiled. So what would you like to see in the village of your ancestors? He spread his arms as if to show me the splendor the village had to offer. What do you suggest? Cats are watching my every move as we walked along the empty streets. The old cemetery. Matters of the soul. So, we have quite a few churches here, Bartek explained, as we walked down the road. 2 Orthodox, 1 Catholic, and even 1 Baptist church, he said, as though it were something uncommon. Was there a synagogue? It seemed like a lot of churches. What's so special about that? I'm not sure what he meant. He looked at me a bit disoriented, then it hit him. Ah, of course, you're not from here. Well, Poland is almost exclusively Catholic, so it's a bit uncommon to have all these denominations in one small village. Any Lutheran churches? Asked Anya. I don't think so. Bartek shook his head as he led us to a small wooden church surrounded by a cemetery. Anyway, even though we have all these churches, there's only one cemetery. The church was Orthodox, but the graves were a mishmash of styles and faiths. Catholic, Orthodox, atheist, everyone resting together. It's pretty unusual. There's approve. Remove the forest. Bartek looked he didn't fully approve of such an arrangement. What kind of person are you? I asked, crossing my arms. Me? Catholic, of course. Of course. He looked at the cemetery, and for a moment he seemed lost in his thoughts. All of my family lies here, he said. I mean, the ones that are dead. Hey, what do you think? What do you think what happens when you die? Only memory remains. I hope for something fair. You left an echo. I like to think that it's something fair. I like the idea of judgment, you know, I mused. Maybe you look at your life and you finally know what you were doing, the things you did, and what came of it all. It would make sense. Bartek nodded. Yeah, I would. I like to believe it does. He looked over the cemetery fence. Well, anyway, it's the spiritual heart of Białowieża. We can go see something else if you like. That's where we stood. I wanted to go in. You didn't want me to. I'll go in. That's why we're here. Are you kidding me? I didn't come here to look at something. I came here to look for something, I said, opening the gate. Bartek shifted uncomfortably. I don't know if that's a good idea. He's hiding something. You found it, my family's grave. Maybe. So what are you waiting for? Anya smiled at him. He mumbled something and led us through the labyrinth of graves to the far end of the cemetery. We continued. The walkways were narrow, and I could tell Bartek was having a hard time finding the way. It wasn't that he was stalling, but genuinely he wasn't sure where to go, especially when we got to the older part of the cemetery. At some point, we saw a woman, tall, broad-shouldered, and one-legged, with gray dreadlocks pinned down to the crown of her head. She must have been in her late 40s or early 50s. She was marching through the walkways with a fury in her eyes. Bartek quickly stood between the graves to get out of her way. I followed his lead. I followed his lead. I think the woman didn't even notice us, lost in her thoughts and anger. Bartek looked at her with a mixture of fear and disdain. I asked Bartek about her. Who was that? I asked, watching the woman leave. Bartek winced. Oh, that's Olga. She's a local activist. She left Iwaveza when she was 18 or something and returned a few years back with the notion that she was going to change this place. We continued to the far corner of the cemetery. There, seemingly forgotten and covered in moss, was a lonely grave. It was damaged. The tombstone was broken deliberately. Someone had obviously smashed it with a hammer. The name was half erased. The plaque was also damaged. Someone had tried to scratch out the name, but the letters were still visible. There was a circle around the grave. There was a circle of coarse salt around the grave. I'm sorry, Bartek sighed. I didn't want you to see that. I looked at the scene. The circle around the grave was broken and disturbed soil where someone had kicked the salt away was fresh. There was more. There was a patch of high grass behind the grave, and I could see something glistening there. A rough wooden cross had been tossed in the grass. On it was a silver medallion, a strange figure of a wolf-headed saint. Something was written along the edges of the medallion, but the letters were too small to make out. That would make me angry, wouldn't it? How dare they? I didn't know who they are, but how dare they desecrate my family grave? Anya squatted and looked at the plaque. I can't read it. The letters are all wrong. She glanced at Bartek. Is it Russian? Belarusian. The same letters, different language, she explained. There were a lot of them here before the war. I looked at Bartek, hoping for some context. Bartek put his hands in his pockets. So you don't know anything about your dad's side of the family? He asked me cautiously. Whatever happened at least 70 years ago, and someone still remembers. I showed him the medallion. Look what I found, I said, showing the medallion. Does this explain anything? He took the medallion, looked at it. It's based on an Orthodox icon, he shrugged. I'm not sure what it means, but I sense unpleasant vibes. A curse, restless dead, lycanthropy. I looked at the grave. I looked at the grave for the last time. My family's name looked strange, written in unfamiliar Belarusian letters. As we were living, I was thinking. I was on something. Hint updated. Was there a werewolf among my ancestors? There was something unnatural about my family, and me coming to Biwaveza had stirred some old demons. I had to find out what my ancestors were doing there. Who were they? Man, I'm gonna get that name of that town right without looking at it someday. With that thought, I left the cemetery. Just looking at her character sheet here. People were scared of my family, scared enough to destroy my family graves. They thought there was a werewolf among my ancestors. Abandoned railway. Train spotting. Bartek wants to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, said Anya. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, it's not like it's that beautiful, but it has, an atmosphere, a climate, an ambiance. Ambiance, Anna said in the same moment as I, and we laughed. Ambiance, Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambiance. We ended up at some abandoned tracks. We soon left the village behind and ended up on some abandoned railway tracks. So this is where the magic happens, I grinned, pointing to empty bottles and used condoms strewn among the tracks. But with the slow winding river and a stone's throw away, the long drooping branches of the old trees shading the unused railway, that place really was picturesque. The bees buzzed around us and the birds sang like there was no morrow. The fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. I remembered the song. As we were walking along the sun, a half-forgotten song came back to me. I must have heard it as a child, and it stuck with me. I didn't understand the words, but the melody seemed fitting for the occasion. I started humming it. As I walked, I started humming the words and working on until the melody felt right. After all, Anya joined me and we just walked, humming and playing with the tune. Bartek laughed. Trust me, it's better that I don't sing. When we entered the dense copse, we noticed a woman standing among the trees. Hello, Bartek, she said. She was stunning. The woman looked like she was in her late 30s and was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. She had a perfect hourglass figure, long braids, and the most stunning cheekbones. Her eyes, slightly slanted, were a weird shade of blue, deep, almost purple. They seemed familiar, and she was looking straight at me. Her eyes were hypnotizing. I stood there transfixed. Hello, Elisabetta Denholovin, answered Bartek. I could hear something in his voice. Was it fear, respect, anger? I couldn't place it. She smiled. I'm Lisa, she said, and smiled at Anya, and then again at me. And you must be Bartek's pen pal, I assume. The one who's searching for ancestry? We exchanged pleasantries. Lisa asked whether I liked it here, what I'd seen, and how long we were planning to stay. Do you mind if I join you? She asked. And Miss Bartek starting to get tense. So what's the story with you two? I asked Bartek. She's from around here. She shook his head. But she helps with protests. You know, Lisa turned to me, the protests against the logging that his father so eagerly promotes. Bartek winced and snapped. I guess, I'm sorry. Shouldn't we coexist with the forest? That means taking what we need to survive, just as everything does. 6,000 trucks of wood isn't taking what you need, kid. She threw me a glance, looking for help. Logging a national park? She had a point. People needed to have jobs. How can they lug trees in a national park? I asked. They don't, Barteks said. It's just near the park's border. If it was about local action, there wouldn't be a problem. Anya chimed in, but it isn't. Giant corporations are at work here with heavy machinery. Ask your friend about his father's money and his clients. Lisa shrugged. Bartek stormed away. I shrugged and followed him. Lisa followed me. We walked the narrow path. The path was too narrow for us all to walk together, so at some point I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time and collect some herbs. So you're looking for your roots, she said after a while. Why? I had dreams. I've been having strange dreams, I answered, and I know they have a hidden meaning. You're wiser than you look, she said, surprised. Sit down with me. She nestled among the roots of an old tree, reached into her basket, and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke and I'll tell you a story, she announced when I hesitated. You need to hear it. I sat down. Tangled roots. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. What I'd learned from Barteks Grandma, you're asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. Why shouldn't I asking about my family? I was asking about my family, I pointed out. Wanted the right branch of the family, she said. Your grandfather wasn't from this village. This is tainted land, girl, she continued. So much blood was spilled that Busa almost lost her mind. Busa was one of the words for forest. Polish had lots of those, but she used it in a weird way. Why do you call the forest Pusa? Isn't Las the right word? I call her a Pusa because it's her proper name, she huffed. Las is to Pusa what dog is to wolf. Domesticated and enslaved used. Pusa is the primeval forest, one untouched by humans, primal, strong, and feared. There was admiration in her voice, and I realized that the words sound like the rustle of leaves, like the wind. Pushash. As I was telling you, Pusas almost went mad, and it's not wise to make these spirits, especially not now. What spirits? You mean the dead? I asked. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable, hard with anger, smoldering somewhere deep within, ready to jump in my throat, and then suddenly something changed. You have no idea, do you? About what? What do you mean? I asked. I have an idea who you are, she stated. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it. Her eyes lost focus as though she was looking at us, something only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, first came the Germans, then the Russians, you know. They actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by Poles in 1920. She shot me a glance. I nodded politely. I didn't really care, but I nodded politely. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter, really. She took a drag. Anyway, many millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped sleeping together. So, to speak, and the Germans came. Then the Russians again. And then there were the forest soldiers. I listened, holding my breath. I was hanging on to every word. They started as Polish soldiers, but then the war ended and they became guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation. And then they ended up desperate bandits, she sighed. For the people who lived here, they were all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers. They killed, they maimed, they tortured, and burned villages. It didn't matter what language they spoke. What did it have to do with me? Thanks for the history lesson, I said. But where do I fit into all of it? My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war, there were some changes, and my whole family was sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She was a Buryat shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this. She looked straight at me. Have you ever wondered what your grandfather did during the war? Suddenly I felt dizzy. I wanted to answer, but suddenly I felt dizzy. The smoke from her joint smelled funny. Of forest moss, strange herbs, ash and blood. I tried to stay focused. I focused and understood that the strange feeling came from within. It was like a long forgotten dream, like an ancient memory that suddenly brought to life. I let it in. We are sitting around the fire, deep in the pusa. The others are sleeping. I listen to the whisper of the leaves. The forest is speaking to me, demanding action. It wants me to be its revenge. I understand what has to be done, and I can't wait to be the forest's revenge. I wake the others to tell them the plan. Tomorrow we're going to burn a village. I sit by the fire and listen to wolves howling at the moon, weeping for their slain brothers and sisters. Then the vision ends. When I came to my senses, Lisa was looking at me. I ran it over in my head. If I understood what you're saying, I looked at her. Something from my family's past cast a shadow on my future. She shrugged. I've told you everything I know. If you want more, talk to my girlfriend. Be at the logging site tomorrow. Yeah, good idea. Grandfather was a forest soldier. I will, I said. Now I finally knew who and what to ask. There you are, Bartek waved at me. I thought I'd lost you. Said goodbye to Lisa and we went back. Bison statues watching with their creepy painted eyes, as though they knew me. A bird of many colors. This is such a nice village, exclaimed Annie as we walked along the quiet street. Nothing moved. The heat was stifling. The village was really quaint. It's quaint, I carefully admitted. But somebody was saying it's a shithole. Bartek made a disgusted face and almost burst out laughing. I was thirsty. Let's go get something to drink, I proposed. I'm parched. The local store was a mini-mart with all kinds of goods, from beer and vegetables to notebooks and pens. There was a bench near the entrance, and on it were a few local drunks. I prepared myself for a confrontation, but nothing happened, and they threw me an appraising glance, murmured something, and let us be. I assessed the threat. They're drunk and no threat, I said, assessing the situation. We can always walk away, and if they try to stop us, all it takes is a firm push, one or two kicks, and then we make a run for it. Why do you even plan things like that? Anya shook her head in disbelief. My stepdad sent me to a self-defense course when I was 12, I shrugged, to help me with my anger management issues. We spent some time inside browsing Latvian, Lithuanian, Belarusian goods. Why was there almost nothing Polish here, and who in their right mind drinks coriander soda? I was putting a soda back on the shelf when we heard a commotion coming from outside, loud voices. Some slurs, some curses, and a clear, mockingly polite, I'm so sorry, darlings, I don't understand. Do you like my skirt? Ah, fuck, Bartek murmured under his breath. I looked outside. There was someone standing next to the drunkard's bench. They were definitely not local. The person was old, not helpless granny old, but old, with deep wrinkles and a narrow mouth. They had the unisex grace of a tired, heroin-preserved rock man. Their shoulder-length, disheveled hair completed the look. They looked out of place. They looked like someone had teleported them there from a different planet. They had a clean shave and eyes highlighted with eyeliner. Their nails were painted with bright blue. They wore heavy army boots and outrageously red skirt, a tank top, and lots of leather jewelry. On their bags there were pins, lots of pins, all kinds of LGBTQA flags, anarchist, pacifist symbols, and I think some German band stripes. Okay, so we're gonna fight some alphabet people here, are we? Mom would have told me to stay out of it. Don't get involved, Mathers told me. You keep getting in trouble. You don't want to get into trouble abroad when there's no one to help you. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I always managed to get involved. I couldn't just let go even now. I approached the foreigner. I smiled and, ignoring the men, approached the foreigner. Hi, I'm Maya. I just got here, I said. They looked at me with a serene smile. Nice to meet you, Maya, they said with an unmistakable German accent. I'm Kim. We started talking. What brings you here, I asked. And Maiwaveza, you mean? I came to see the forest and to protect it. They sounded deadly serious. Me and my friends heard about what's happening here and we decided to come and help. The men on their bench were looking at us grimly. Hey, someone said suddenly from behind our backs. Kim smiled and the men on the bench stiffened. I turned around. It was Lisa. You should stop drinking that moonshine. It makes you pick fights you can't win, she said. She looked ferocious. And the drunks started explaining themselves. But look at this, Azunia, one of them, gesturing towards us. For the last fucking time, the name's Lisa. She was furious. And this is my friend. You have to leave them alone, get it? The drunkards mumbled something and went back to drinking. Thanks, Lisa, Kim said in English. You shouldn't have. Oh, but I wanted to. How did she command so much respect? Why did they listen to you? I asked. She turned at me and shrugged just a hint of smile. Oh, they have their reasons. I think I saw relief in her eyes when she looked at me. Hi, Maya. I was worried you had gotten yourself into trouble there. So will you join us on the anti-logging protest tomorrow? She asked me after a while. Suddenly, a feeling washed over me. I was cold. Suddenly I felt cold despite the hot, sticky summer air, as though there was a wind from the forest that blew only for me, inside me, chilling my bones and blood. There was something sad and helpless about it, even though it felt all-powerful. A word appeared in my mind, a strange one, was neither Polish nor English. Harano. I noticed Kim watching me. I felt like I was being watched, and when I looked up, I saw Kim observing me with their curious expression. They were hiding something? They knew what had happened to me? I realized they knew I'd felt this strange connection to the forest. Tell me, I asked. I know you have strange dreams, they whispered. I suspect the forest is reaching out to you. They leaned closer to me. It runs in your blood. The words were like a punch to the gut. Trust me, I know. Who was I? I asked quietly. You can see the invisible, they said, looking at me in the eyes. You'll find the way. Suddenly I feel confident. I keep on losing and then regaining willpower for some reason. I wasn't making that up. There was something strange in my family history. There were people who knew what was going on. Before I could ask more, Anya and Bartek approached and Kim shook their heads, silencing me. Meet us tomorrow at the logging site. They blew me a kiss and put their arms around Lisa and walked away. We decided to leave as well. Kept looking over my shoulder, but no one was following us. We called it a day and went back. The first evening, the B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back, smiling and a little flustered. What a day, she smiled. What do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. They were cutting down the forest. I remembered the scene at the shop. I mentioned the graveyard. I told her what happened when I talked with Lisa. Something weird happened when I was talking with Lisa. I think it was her joint, but I saw things that looked like something from the past. Like from your past? For a second I searched for words to explain it to her, but I couldn't really. I think it was my grandpa. It's hard to say. It sure was weird. I shrugged, ending the topic. I mentioned the graveyard. I meant that people here are still vandalizing my family's grave. What did my grandfather do? She put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever it is, it's not your fault. It wasn't, but it could be my responsibility. Scene at the shop. Remember the shop? The tension seemed almost unnatural. A few words and it would be a regular fight. Maybe they just envied Kim's style. Anya tried to joke, but she seemed worried. Cutting down the forest. Can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest a UNESCO list or something? Yes, I know, but I want to check out the protest people were talking about. Maybe we'll go there tomorrow? I didn't feel like talking anymore. You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. Even though I was tired, sleep didn't come quickly. Anxiety was spreading its cold, writhing roots deep in my chest and stomach. I lay there for some time looking at the silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the weird vision that I had that day. My roots were here. I could feel them, almost touch them, and they were reaching to me. I felt I was close to getting my answers. I felt the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I just had to go and see the logging protest, meet the right people, and make them talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors. I drifted off. A night in the woods. The railroad tracks remember times of their glory. The trees around them whisper about forgotten secrets. I tremble. Something is coming. It's huge and monstrous. I'm a cub. I'm a wolf cub like the ones my grandfather told me about. I will roll my fangs. When they become sharper, I will taste blood. I feel a pull and surrender to it. I run toward a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones standing around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting, and suddenly they are just trees and tree trunks. Why, I could either look around, or cry, or start dancing. How do you dance if you're a cub? They don't cry, so I look around. I look around, my nostrils flare. Who did it? Who murdered the trees? There is a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirling, chainsaws, their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that glisten. intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait unmoving. I charge at them. Try to breathe through my mouth as I run towards the machines. I hit and kick them blindly, screaming at the top of my lungs. And in my own screams I hear strange whispers. They tell me to look at the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other. An old sad wolf with grey hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance. Suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful, rotting stench. I knew that much. But how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me and the clearing. I give them my blessing. I spill my blood and bless them with words that I do not recognize, but that I understand. They come down to me, and their voice is the voice of the Pusa. Welcome back. You've been away far too long time. I wake up. Well, so yeah, that's the end of the first chapter, and we're just almost an hour in. So that's probably a good place to cut it off for now. Alright, yeah, so it's been interesting. I'm not really familiar with this whole werewolf and, Vampire the Masquerade type lore, so it'll be a new experience for me. But, yeah, once again, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas if I don't see you again. Have a good evening. Bye.